for more on what this conference might mean for the future of Ukraine. We are joined by Remi Piet. He is the senior partner at Embellie Advisory. Good to have you back with us, sir. I don't know how you calculate the cost of rebuilding when the fighting is still raging. Explain this to me.
Well, right now, the estimation, it's nice to talk to you, Phil, by the way. The estimation are around $350 billion, but this number is likely to increase as the conflict continues for several months. It's an estimation. What's more important is actually to look at the mechanism, after the conflict and the dedication from European countries to work together and maybe fund a future Marshall Plan that we've seen at the end of the Second World War. This commitment from different countries, the mechanism, looking at the institution that will be involved into it, and that structure itself is very important to set together more than the actual number itself that is likely to increase. We're already talking about 38 billion of deficits for next year's budget in Ukraine, and in terms of destructions, and when you look at the power plants, bridges, roads, this $350 billion, as I said, is likely to increase, and Ukraine will desperately need the support from European countries and G20 countries more generally to help for the rebuilding of its country.
What is the relationship between this reconstruction plan that they're talking about versus the inclusion into the European Union, which is of course being pushed along here, and of course then I won't even bring up the word NATO, but there seems to be, there's something here, and I can't put my finger on it.
Well, if you actually look back at history, there's very strong similarities with the 1946, Marshall Plan, where the U.S. made sure that Western Europe would actually be part of the Western world. It would not fall into the communist world by, financing a real building. So here, the idea is to actually be able to have structures and mechanisms to rebuild the Ukraine territory and the infrastructure, and that will be indeed coupled with, having Ukraine back in terms, join the European Union, or at least the European sphere of influence and economic zone, much as it was the case for, as I said, Western Europe at the end of the Second World War. Ukraine has strong assets when you look at it. It's very young population, very active. There was a lot of different startups and quite a strong high-tech sector that was booming in Ukraine. So all these, and also obviously the potential for farming products and raw material, some of them are in the Donbas region as of today. So there is also for the European Union to get Ukraine as part of their economic sphere of influence and a strong trading partner for the future. So this rebuilding has to be seen as obviously a strong investment for the future as the Ukrainian population moved away from Russia. That still was until recently the number one trading partner. Obviously that won't be the case after the conflict, and being able to put in place the bridges for future economic development.
But here's the thing. I mean, we're just showing some of the pictures there of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The claims of potential use of nuclear weapons, the claims of potential use of a dirty bomb. If that were to happen from Russia's side, the Ukrainians and the supporters, Western Europe and the United States included, has already said that there'd be dire consequences. In other words, we're talking about potentially not just the destruction of Ukraine, but nuclear fallout that would reach outside of Ukraine, in addition to potential destruction from what the quote West might do in retaliation, or to, I guess, retaliate in response to the use of these weapons. We just don't know. Do you think that this is something we need to worry about?
Well, those claims from Russia are very worrying, and not only in terms of this escalation of the conflict. The answer from Ukraine and the European Union was very quickly to say, look, if you're claiming that there's a building of dirty bombs into those two power plants, let the United Nations inspect it, and that shows that it's very unlikely that this is the case in Ukraine. But this is probably a very good tactic from Russia to legitimate the use of further military arsenal that could include nuclear weapons. It's likely that those nuclear weapons would be more localized nuclear weapons and nuclear explosions, because even if, obviously this would be terrible in terms of the situation in Ukraine, any kind of use of large nuclear arsenal and explosion will also impact eastern Ukraine that now Russia claims to be part of its territory. So here you have potentially an attempt at using rhetorics to create the blame on Ukraine for further military tactics from Russia. But indeed, there will be some impacts for the neighbors.
To get to this reconstruction that we're talking about here, there has to be some sort of de-escalation, right? We first need this thing to stop, a de-escalation, a truce, if you will. Call it what you want, but that has to happen first, right? Do you think that that's
Yes.
possible in the near term, and what does it look like?
Yes, absolutely. When you talk about reconstruction, you can't talk about serious reconstruction before the end of a conflict, because as your reporter was rightly saying, building new infrastructure that are likely to be bombed again by Vladimir Putin makes absolutely no sense. Now, looking at whether or not the Russia and Ukraine will be ready to to get together for negotiations, it very much depends on the ongoing conflict today. The European Union was saying that there will not be negotiation until Ukraine actually agrees to sit down at the table. And for Ukraine, it's not the only condition is for Russia to come back to its earlier frontiers, and that's something that Putin is not willing to listen to. So it's unlikely that we're going to see some serious peace negotiations in the near future, and that's why when we're talking about $350 billion, this is a very small amount of what will be needed actually at the end of the conflict. Again, what's important to see this presence of those mechanisms and this dedication from European partners to stand with Ukraine. Right. That might be a very strong signal also to Russia.
Remi, I hope you are right that there is a serious effort being made on some sort of peace negotiations or even de-escalation at this point. Appreciate the analysis of the time on this, Remi. Thank you.